My name is Rob Tatt. I'm a professor of psychology at the University of Tulsa. We're here to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and its measurement. So, what is emotional intelligence and how is it different from IQ? Emotional intelligence, or EI, tends to be understood by most people as a fairly simple idea, mostly having to do with emotional control and getting along well with others. It definitely includes those things, but there's a lot more to it. EI is actually a combination of several different things, which is why we call it multidimensional. And it's critical to recognize all the parts so we can better understand EI and all the different ways it can affect people both personally and professionally. We define EI as the ability and willingness to attend to and modify emotions in the self and others, often through empathy and controlled emotional expression. Now there's quite a bit there, so let's unpack it a bit. First, EI can be understood as both an ability and a personality trait. People associate intelligence, or IQ, with ability, and EI, also known as EQ, is seen by most people as an ability or skill in the sense that more is better. In a given situation where EI is relevant, responding in an EI appropriate way is the correct or best response, and behavior otherwise is problematic or incorrect. People high on EI more often behave correctly. Those lower on EI, on the other hand, behave less correctly or are correct less often. Now, EI clearly does lend itself to an ability-based interpretation, but that's only part of the story. Motivation also plays an important role in our understanding of EI. People differ in the propensity to seek out and engage emotionally relevant situations. For some, intimate emotional sharing can be a profound and moving experience. Yet for others, it can be terrifying. Some will seek out emotional situations, whereas others will tend to avoid them. Now, when finding themselves in an emotionally charged situation, regardless of whether or not they sought it out, some people will willingly engage, whereas others will actively disengage. In an important sense, then, EI is very much like a personality trait. Ability and personality traits are separate things, but they tend to go hand in hand. Ability captures the can-do of behavior. Personality and motivation capture the will-do. EI has both can-do and will-do aspects, and so needs to be understood as a combination or a hybrid. Consider a simple example. Imagine a leader walking by the office of a direct report, cursing at his computer. Whether or not the boss helps requires two things. First, she has to be able to help. She has to recognize the worker is frustrated and could benefit from helping. She also needs to know what it will take to calm the worker down, to solve the problem and get back to work. This might vary from worker to worker. It might take humor for one person and sympathy for another. A high EI boss has the ability to distinguish these things. The second thing the leader needs to have is a willingness to help, which means choosing to stop rather than attending to all the other things that are going on. People vary in both respects, the ability to make a difference and the willingness to try. EI captures both the can-do and the will-do aspects of dealing with emotions, in this case, the emotions of a worker. A leader who has the ability to help but chooses to ignore the opportunity would not be considered a high EI boss. And nor would we say the boss is high on EI if she stopped to help and ended up just making things worse. In addition to the can-do and will-do parts of EI, the definition also talks about attending to and modifying emotions. These are distinct steps in practicing good EI, and one has to happen before the other. First, we need to notice emotional information in our surroundings. Sometimes it's obvious. For example, two co-workers might be arguing loudly, but it's more often a subtle thing, as when a normally cheerful, easygoing person is suddenly sensitive to criticism. People higher on EI are more able and prepared to notice the subtler cues about others' emotional states. Then, once a suitable opportunity is recognized, efforts can be directed to improving the emotional state of the individual. These are distinct processes, as someone might notice an emotional issue but choose to ignore it, or lack the skill to deal with it effectively. Alternatively, they may not even notice a problem due to an inability and/or a lack of interest, and so fail to engage EI even if they have the ability to help. Okay, so EI is a hybrid of ability and motivation, and it deals with both recognizing emotion and then managing it. The third part of the definition we need to unpack is the distinction between the self and others. People high on EI are able and willing to recognize and improve their own emotions and also those of other people. Managing one's own emotional state can be critical in situations provoking fear, anger, uncertainty, apathy, and it can also be important when managing those around us, whether as a leader, for example, in inspiring workers to attend a challenging task, or as a friend, for example, in consoling someone who's just lost a loved one. Some of us are good at attending to and managing our own feelings, but less inclined and able to deal with the emotional states of others. Some of us have the reverse orientation, and yet others have both or neither. Given all these possibilities, we need to distinguish between EI applied to the self and EI applied to other people. A couple of other parts of EI included in the definition are empathy and emotional expression. Empathy is related to recognizing emotions in others, but it adds by putting yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding, almost feeling what they're going through. This makes it easier to help them. Emotional expression is related to emotional self-regulation, but it emphasizes how outward behavior is perceived by others. Communication is about more than just words. People pick up on emotional behaviors, and it helps to be able to use one's outward expressions to communicate emotional information. Empathy and emotional expression together contribute to emotional sharing, which is an important feature of interpersonal communication. Beyond the core components of EI that are included in the definition, there are several related applications of EI we call proximal outcomes. These include creative thinking, which is a matter of using emotions as additional input in solving problems. Intuition versus reason is another proximal outcome, which is finding the right balance between emotions and logic in decision making. There's optimism about the past, which is about putting a positive spin on tough situations, basically growing from one's mistakes. And then there's optimism about the future, keeping a positive outlook going forward. Not all situations have a plus side, but people high on EI willingly engage the future by emphasizing the good in light of the potential downsides. To sum up, EI is not as simple as it might appear to be. It has both ability or can do and trait or will do aspects. It includes both attending to and then dealing with emotions. It can be applied to both the self and others, and it includes empathy and emotional expression as aspects of emotional sharing. In addition, it has several closely related applications, like creative thinking and optimism. EI is all of those things wrapped up in a seemingly tidy little ball. It's important in measuring and working with EI, however, that we not be seduced into thinking it's simpler than it really is.